colour palette of black and white covered with a blanket of blues is reflective in the music, as there is a solo viola played by Tim Chio, accompanied by the piano. It is quite a simple piece compared to the rest of the soundtrack, and the piece has an overall melancholy and dark tone, which fits in perfectly with the mood of the town of Dirtmouth. Both the viola and the piano have a sombre, mellow tone colour, and so they work together quite well to set the mood for the rest of Hallownest. The piece begins with a low E drone on the cello, followed shortly by the piano, which introduces both the melody and the accompaniment that the piece uses. This piece is in E Dorian, which is one of the 7 church modes. The Dorian mode, which sounds like this, has a minor sound but with a glimmer of hope near the end of the scale. On the list of brighter to darker sounding modes, the Dorian mode sits in between the major mode, Ionian, and just before the minor mode, Aeolian. Modes give musicians a wider palette of emotional soundscapes to use, rather than just the 2 most popular modes of major and minor. Christopher Larkin has made a good choice to use the Dorian mode, as it has a nice balance between sounding eerie but also a little bit sweet. Using the Dorian mode is a great idea for this piece, but because of the popularity of the major and minor keys, we are accustomed to hearing the music in one of these keys. Since this piece is in E Dorian, it could easily sound like it is in a minor key, without the correct use of techniques. In order to combat this, the use of a pedal tone drone at the beginning of the piece in the cello, as well as the piano, helps to ground the music in E Dorian, while we hear the melody on top. Arguably one of the most important parts of writing music is the use of tension and release. It helps keep the music interesting and drives the piece forward with a great sense of momentum. The music moves itself. The use of tension or dissonance is heard right from the very beginning of the melody from the first note. The piece begins on an E minor chord, and the melody uses the 9th scale degree, which is considered dissonant in relation to the E minor chord, because it is not a chord tone. The use of this extension in the melody creates tension which needs to be resolved. However, this F sharp never really feels like it resolves properly until the very end of the piece. But since the music loops in the game, we never actually hear the ending, and so technically the melody never fully resolves. One particularly special chord in this piece is the F major chord, about 30 seconds into the piece. This is what we call a Neapolitan 6th or a flat 2 chord. This chord keeps things fresh, as it is not from the mode of E Dorian, so it helps to keep the music moving and provide some momentum. This change of harmony might seem to point toward a resolution of some kind, but the melody simply goes back to that 9th chord extension and refuses to resolve. Toward the end of the piece, there is a piano solo, which uses a variation of the melody that was used in the viola before. It begins with a C major chord, followed by an A minor chord, and then an E minor chord with a G in the bass, which then resolves to a normal E minor chord. The next 4 bars follow a very similar pattern, but the A minor chord is now an A major chord, and the E minor chord at the end is now an F major chord, where the viola is introduced again. There is an ascending arpeggio on the piano. Since the music loops in the game, we never actually hear this ending, but we'll still talk about it for the sake of this analysis. The majority of notes in the arpeggio comes from the E minor chord, and the highest note it ends on is an E, which is a tonic of this piece. So the harmony does eventually resolve at the very end of the piece. You may have noticed throughout this piece of music that the viola kind of makes a wobbly sound. This is called vibrato, and it's a technique that musicians, especially string players, use to make those long drawn out notes more rich and colourful. The use of vibrato in this piece might sound like someone crying out or longing for the town of Dirtmouth that used to be so vibrant and lively. Both the piano and the viola have a lot of freedom in the time, as if they're not worried about keeping in time at all. You'll notice this if you try to tap along to the beat. There are points where you have to slow down, speed up, or even pause for a moment before the music keeps going. This is called rubato, and it has been around for a very long time. The use of rubato bends and stretches time in the music as the musicians see fit, and it creates a much more emotionally engaging performance and makes the music less predictable. The use of rubato in this piece is an obvious choice. It's like the ebb and flow of the wind in the forgotten town of Dirtmouth. Dirtmouth is a dark and lonely place. It is introduced as the fading town each time you enter it. The town used to be a lively place filled with other bugs, as Elderbug puts quite well.
Oh, jittery.
The atmosphere of Dirtmouth is well supported by the intimate piano and viola music in the background, and it really sets the overall mood for the entire game as you begin your journey into the depths of Hallownest. I really hope that you enjoyed the video today and that you learnt something about the music of Dirtmouth. I look forward to seeing you in my next video in 2 weeks from now. See ya.